like it's so like
Mm-hmm.
I can know anything, and even what's online may not even be real. So they really want to understand. They want to explore. They want to experience. And there's no one better in this world to help them find something deeper than the Lord. Welcome to Magnified Ministry Podcast, the podcast dedicated to inspiring, encouraging, and equipping parish leaders to build thriving missionary communities in today's rapidly changing world. This is the Magnified Ministry Podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Magnified Ministry Podcast. Marco's with us. We missed him last week as I had this brilliant conversation with Stephen Foster, and boy, that was a great conversation just on what he sees in the church in the UK and really his visionary work in this pre-Christian world. And we are starting this new 4-week series that we are very excited about. And it's the invitation for us as a church to look into the mind of Gen Zs, to unpack them a little bit more, and to kind of ask this question, like, what kind of a church Gen Zs want to inherit? Like, what is it that is our gift to them as a church? And our 4-week series, today we'll talk a little bit about why mystery matters. We'll look into a bit of research, and we'll kind of try to tell you what we've seen in studies, and clearly here at St. Clement, like Gen Zs are really drawn to this question of mystery.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll unpack this and we'll say, like, how do you translate mystery? Because if it's unpacked, it's just a momentarily flame and they just go away, right? So how do you keep mystery translated into becoming a way of life? And the third week, we'll invite one of our alpha leaders, Nathan, to talk with us about what mystery in action looks like. So what does he do with 350 young adults who come for Alpha? Like, what does he see God doing in them, in the leaders, in the community? And hopefully that will be kind of for you a little bit deeper invitation to understanding this whole idea of mystery. And then we'll kind of conclude the whole series with the fourth week when we talk about not only a tradition, but how do we share a co-ownership for the church's future with the next generation, right?
Yeah, and I think I'd like to start today, since we're going to be talking about this idea of the church that Gen Zs are starting to be attracted to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the openness to God is there, the openness to spirituality is there, but there are still barriers to openness, right? And I think one of the pieces that we want to talk about is some of the research that's coming out fresh right off the press, right, from folks in the UK. In particular, Dr. Jack Driver, who I think you had a chance to spend some time while you were in London, and he's done a lot of work in his dissertation for some of his studies, looking at Gen Z not from a sociological standpoint, but looking at them from a theological standpoint and trying
Yeah.
to understand what is stirring in their hearts and what's the message that will resonate with them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
this isn't about changing God, and this is not about changing teachings. This is about changing the way we communicate what we believe. But before we start and dive into some of the things that we've learned from Jack, I want to ask you a question. Um, do you enjoy American football?
No.
Why?
I know nothing about it.
Okay. You've watched, I'm assuming.
Oh, I watch. I've been to the games. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it's kind of like same. We're foreign. I'm Mexican. You're Polish. You grew up watching or playing football, soccer,
Soccer.
right? And for us, the American football game made absolutely no
No,
sense,
no, no.
right? Like you throw the ball, there's four downs. It's just extremely confusing, right? And you
Unless you go and watch it at Notre Dame.
Oh gosh.
Unless you
I don't
go to
even know.
the Holy Land of the United States, the University of Notre Dame.
I'm not even gonna get into that. Though I have been to a game in Notre Dame and Michigan trounced all over them, and that was awesome. Love Notre Dame
Clearly,
fans.
you can see who Mark and I
Exactly.
support.
But I think what I'm trying to get to is the game of football is weird. It's unique. It's different. It's got its
Yeah,
own set of rules. It's got its own set of ways
yeah.
of playing. But the game itself has changed over time, right? But the objective is still the same:
Sure.
score more points than the other team, right? But what changed me into a fan for being someone that despised the game were people
Now you're
that
crazy about it.
I
Now
am
you're
now,
crazy about
but
it.
back in the day I used to hate it. And the reason is because there were people when I was in high school that were big fans of Michigan football where I live, and they invited me to watch games with them. They explained the games to me. They little by little helped me make sense of it. They invited me to play video games games with them, and it all started to make sense little by little by little. It wasn't because I went and I learned and I did all this by myself, because it would have been impossible to figure out,
Yeah.
but someone was there to help make sense of this very mysterious and weird
Mm.
and opaque and foreign game that Americans love. And I think in some ways that's a little bit of what where I'm interpreting what Jack is talking about, is that this generation is being drawn to a faith that
Yeah.
is transcendent, that is mysterious, that there's tradition. But I think with those words, with those realities, we have to remember that in order to enter into some of those things, you have to have a bit of translation. You
Mm.
have to have a bit of
Oh yeah.
interpretation. You have to have a little bit of accompaniment. And so I think um, that's the tension that we want to talk about, right? Is Gen Z is being drawn into the. You talked about it in one of the last podcasts, right? That this is what we heard in London last time we were there. The weirdness, the uniqueness, the timelessness of the Catholic faith, but they need someone to help guide them into it, because otherwise that initial attraction will become very quickly a sense of opposition because they can't fully understand it and make sense of it in their day-to-day life.
And to some extent, that's why again I would argue that Pope Francis really, uh, I deeply believe that he really was an anointed leader as the successor of Peter. Clearly, all of them are, but I think Francis had a prophetic voice in Evangelii Gaudium into not only naming the reality that didn't become a reality for the next 20 years. I think he was able to
Mm,
discern things that will happening in the future, and that his whole focus on accompaniment. This is just he could repeat it over and over and over again to the frustrations of so many people. But I think as you now look at Gen Zs,
mm-hmm.
10 years later, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, Francis was preparing the church for what was coming, for what is coming. And
Sure.
I think our prayer is, as we started this podcast, is that the church pays attention to what the Pope says,
And the
and that
signs
we
of the
are,
times.
and that
Right.
exactly
Right.
as Second Vatican Council says, we read the signs of the times, and we respond to them appropriately in presenting the message of the gospel. Now what Jack did
Yeah,
is
tell us a bit about what, because
in
you got a
his
chance to spend some time with him.
yeah, so in his PhD dissertation, Jack Driver Shanley, he teaches at the college, and he is involved in HTB and preaches and all that stuff. He's an Anglican priest and brilliant young man, but he started started studying Gen Zs for dissertation before Gen Zs became a thing, and he focused on this theology of this Swiss Protestant theologian from 1900s whose name was Karl Barth. And Barth is known. I mean, there's a lot of books you can read by him. And basically he's all about grace, right? But mind you, he is a Swiss pastor in a time when communism and Hitler, fascism, all this stuff comes into play. And so he kind of looks at the reality of the world and he says, we strip faith from what's most important and we made it into this kind of a touchy-feely political thing that was never meant to be. And unless you reclaim this secret within it, you will really struggle with
Mm-hmm.
moving people's hearts. So Bard would insist on just this kind of radical theological reset that actually is very much rooted in a Catholic tradition and in the Bible itself, that God is not discovered by human effort,
Sure.
that is not explained into existence, but God reveals himself, right? It's
Yeah.
going back to Augustine,
Yeah.
that God truly, unexpectedly um, reveal himself in Christ Jesus, and then that this journey continues of God revealing himself. St. Augustine talk about it. I remember when I was taking classes in Mandalay, studying to be a priest, one of my professors obviously was Bishop Bob Barron, and I know Bob quite well, and over the years, and he taught us a class on the doctrine of God, and Bob Barron always would say that he used the example of Saint Augustine, and he would say Augustine said that faith is like a feather, and God is like a feather, and you have to extend your hand, your palm, and await in expectation. And then at one point, the feather will land on your hand. You will receive this gift of deeper knowledge, of deeper communion, you name it. But if you try to catch it, if it's about your control, not God's grace, then with the movement of the air, the feather will be pushed away, and it will never land.
Look at that science, Les. You're just throwing that knowledge in.
And but I think that's a powerful image, isn't it?
Well, and I think one of the pieces, as you're talking, right? There's a line in Alpha. I mean, I can't. I go simple, right? Like there's a line in the first week of Alpha that talks about science and faith not being at odds, but being really complemented together. Because many of the earliest and greatest scientific minds of our time were Christian.
Yep.
And many people today, in today's world, will be like, well, faith doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't explain anything. And it's like, that's completely non-complementary. And the reality is that science can answer the questions what and how, but they can never answer the questions of why and who.
Mm-hmm.
Only the Creator can. And in some ways, that's what faith gives us. It gives us a lens into creation. And the other piece that I think is really interesting that you're pointing to is theology is the exploration of the revelation of God.
That's right.
Science is the exploration of the revelation of God through creation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love, I remember hearing this, thinking that like many
goes
of the
side by
scientists,
side.
the reason why they were scientists, God gave them their subject. They were thinking God's thoughts after him.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something really beautiful in what you're saying is sometimes I think we as humans, particularly us millennials, we were so filled with this idea that like we can figure it out. We are smarter than any generation that's ever come before us. We have more information than anyone that's ever come before us. We got the internet, we got Wikipedia, we got ChatGPT. There is nothing that we can't know. Why would that be any different with faith?
Yeah.
And I think what the beauty in the simplicity of faith is like, it's not for us to find out.
Yeah.
That image of the hand open to the feather is exactly that, which is like, we are not God. We are creation. And we are meant to not think the Creator's thoughts. We are meant to discover those over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the pieces that I'm seeing with the next generation is they are drawn by the discovery, not by the need to know. If that makes sense, right? Like they don't care about like wanting to know right now because they live in a world where they can have everything and anything at their fingertips, and that just feels
so much deeper. Yeah,
it's like it's so like I can know anything, and even what's online may not even be real. So they really want to understand. They want to explore. They want to experience, and there's no one better in this world to help them find something deeper than the Lord.
And again, within a Catholic tradition, that's the beauty of it, right? Is that 2,000 years of tradition. I mean, even, if you jump to Thomas Aquinas, clearly in his Summa, Aquinas teaches that while we can truly know God, we can never comprehend who God fully is because God always exceeds our concepts, right? There's this famous Catholic verse, right? God is always greater. And that's
Say
not
it in Latin, please,
for
our Latin-speaking listeners.
And I will say it in English. God is always greater, but this is not anti-intellectual, right? It's not anti-intellectual. It's an act of reverence, right? Of knowing that God is the one who reveals Himself. And what I noticed, right, especially with Gen Zs, and what I think Jack points out to is this drawn into what you name, which is the sacred, the mystery of it, the mystical of it, the transcendent of it. And Tom Holland, who has this incredible podcast we both listen to called
The
Um,
rest is
the
history.
rest is history. Um, he not Christian himself, but he talked at our global leadership conference at Alpha, and recently he was interviewed by Bishop Barron, and he said the same thing in both places. He said, "Embrace the weird," meaning that people are actually attracted to what God can do that nobody else can do. So
Yes.
don't shy away from the healing stories.
Yes.
Show the healing stories as unexplainable movements of God, right? As you read them in the Bible, they're happening today because Jesus is equally risen
Yeah.
and present in our midst. And I think the same thing happens, with like we would have people uh, that would join us for Palm Sunday procession or Corpus Christi procession. They're not even believers, but they are so attracted to a radical movement of faith, and they're like, "Wow, this is something." Right now, next week we'll talk about what do you do with it, because
Yes.
I think that's very important. But I think what we see is that this is not the time for the church to water down
No.
what we believe. This is not the time for the church to be afraid
Yeah.
to say we cannot explain the movement of God within us, but we can, through the stories, show you the evidence that God is constantly moving in
It
us, right?
and there's two pieces that I think are fascinating that you're seeing. Um, I always think looking at what non-denominational churches do is an interesting litmus test to where uh, young people are moving,
Yeah,
right? Because they have a much better ability to adapt
yeah,
and pivot and grab things than us Catholics for whatever reason that is. And one of the things that I saw start to happen a couple years ago was um, the liturgical celebrations of Advent and Lent and Ash Wednesday and things
Palm
like that,
Sunday.
Palm Sunday, that are traditionally not Protestant in the liturgical sense because it's just different, are being brought in to some of
Big
those
time.
services, right? And it's interesting to me. I'm like, that's like it's being kind of plucked out and put in. And I'm like, why is that? And you read some of the reasons why, and they
Yeah,
say like, we've come to recognize that the people that are coming to us, like, yes, the Bible is super important, and they're deep in the Word, but they're yearning for something that feels transcendent, for something that feels like ageless, timeless,
yeah.
and they're kind of saying they're looking for something sacramental, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which it really is.
Absolutely.
Like it's not a full sacrament to have,
Mm.
but
Call them sacramentals.
so sacramentals, right? Because there is something beautiful
Yeah,
in the physicalness of our
yeah,
faith, right? And I think you started the episode at the beginning. It was like we're reclaiming some of the things that we as a church had for
yeah,
thousands of years that we maybe just got in the habit of doing, and we forgot about the reason why we're doing it and the meaning of it. And
yeah.
I I, I enjoy reading. He's a pastor out in the West Coast, John Mark Comer. He's written a ton of books,
Sure.
and one of the things he talks about, as his and his church try to go into a direction that was really about following Jesus and discipleship and reorienting towards spiritual formation, was this idea that the way is a way of living, right? And it's just a bunch of things you do, and that one of the his beliefs is that the future Christian that's really rooted is going to be very mystical, right?
Mm.
Because you kind of have to be able to traverse the today and get into the spiritual realm. And I think that's what we're seeing, right? Is young people have a desire for deeply physical experiences, right? That
Mm-hmm.
are real and tangible, while at the same time
Exactly.
wanting to understand this spiritual realm that in some ways to them just feels so new because spiritual stuff has been overtaken by digital stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's it's fascinating that young people from a faith standpoint want to move away from digital and go analog and go like deeper into like what
Mm-hmm.
that means.
And and I think there's a movement of God in it. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I find so comforting about.
Yeah.
Like, wow, God is on the move.
Yeah.
He's now finding new ways to and they're not new ways, but resurrect the old ways to becoming new ways. And I always think about the church, right? Like the physical church, the community of the church, like parish like St. Clement. I was thinking, like, if the church is the family of God, then what do we do? How we worship, how the church looks, is an expression of what makes us feel at home spiritually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like for this generation, the spiritual feeling is a lot of opportunities for confessions, a lot of opportunities for adorations, a lot of opportunities for spiritual direction. Right? It's this longing for sacred and deep
Sacredness. Yep.
and the one that the world cannot explain, and something that is here for hundreds, if not thousands, of years that links us directly to the apostolic church, to the
Yes.
early church. And I think there's such a yearning for it
Yeah.
because it cannot be, it's just not self-generated.
And I think the beautiful thing it's a both and, because while you see the growth in that, you also see this desire for some of the like more charism
Yeah,
related get and the openness to the Holy Spirit in a way that I never really
yeah,
experienced, right? And the ease by which some of the young people that we had on our podcast talked about the relationship with Jesus and their desire to share the gospel and their ability to pray with and for others and to lean into this idea of living in the Spirit. Like in some ways, I think we as a church, and please, push back if you think I'm wrong, but like as we came out of Second Vatican Council, right, like we kind of splintered into different expressions of worship, right, and different,
sure.
like poles in the church. You're either like a traditionalist, or you're, much more
Guitar
like
mass.
exactly right. You're either like Latin mass or it's like the guitar mass, and it's like why do we have to? The beauty of our church is like it's both and.
It's Catholic. Yeah,
It's not left and right. It's like it's Catholic. Like God desires to be worshipped,
yeah,
whether it is in Latin or in English, whether it's with an organ or a guitar or drums. Like that's worship.
yeah,
And whether we are being drawn to, from a devotional
yeah,
standpoint, some of the, or it's about praying with people, and
yeah.
and it's like all of that is what we've always had in our tradition. And I feel like young people today are like, stop putting labels on us. Stop trying to
Mm-hmm.
fit us in the boxes that you millennials and boomers try to get into yourselves. Like we want all of it. That's the beauty of the Catholic faith is all of that. Like let us unpack that. Let us figure out what that means. Like
Yeah,
let me live in adoration while at the same time being able to maybe even pray for healing for others. Maybe even
yeah,
receive different gifts of the Spirit. Like it's both and.
yeah. No, that's so important, and I think it's in the end there's one goal to it, which is, the encounter of the risen Lord. Pope Benedict, and Deus Caritas est, God is love. In the first chapter of it, he said, being Christian is not the result of ethical choice or lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life, a new horizon, and divisive direction. Right? That is such a beautiful quote from Pope Benedict. And I think that's the invitation. The invitation is in the end, everything needs to lead to the moment of encounter. And what we see, I think that this is why we are recording this new series, is like we just want you to be aware as church leaders. What we see helps the encounter for
Yep.
Gen Zs is this deep mystical experiences where you have, evening opportunities for adoration and candles and, incense and Gregorian chant
And
and
prayer.
you name it, and the silence and they are drawn to it. And if they are drawn to it, maybe that's the gift God is giving to them. And we as a church should not be on the, stand on the way of saying, well, that's not how we've done things.
Yes.
Well, then change how you've done things, because the people who have done those things are people no more there. And the people who are eager and coming are people who are searching for something else. So we just encourage you, because there's so much opportunity. And I know for us at St. Clement, that was a huge learning over the last 5 years of starting new things and driving new opportunities.
Yep.
And we just see fruit in it. And it's not about being busier or being more, um, offering more programs. It is about fruitfulness. And if that's where God brings fruitfulness through, then we have to be obedient into offering that.
The question in the next one is going to be, how do you actually bring this to
That's
life,
right.
right? Because the challenge we're putting in front of you, and we've talked about this a lot in the
How do
podcast,
you
is
translate the mystery, right?
because reality is like you're going to have to do things differently. Our listeners, priests, pastors, parish leaders, deacons, whoever you may be, because the way that you were formed is going to allow you to engage people in one particular way, but young people need more than what we alone have. right?
And what we understood in the
and
past.
what we understood
That's
in our
right.
way. So that's why we're hoping to be able to unpack for you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we cannot wait to be with you next week.
We'll see you soon.